Okay, welcome back to Databases and Database Users. This is episode 7. We're going to pick up with where we left off, so let's proceed. Let's talk about database personnel for a little while. In large organizations, many people are involved in the design, use, and maintenance of a large database with hundreds of users. In a database environment, the primary resource is the database itself. And the secondary resource is the database management system and the related software. Administering these resources is the responsibility of the database administrator, the DBA. The DBA is responsible for authorizing access to the database, coordinating and monitoring its use, and acquiring software and hardware resources as needed. The database administrator, or DBA, is accountable for problems such as security breaches and poor system response time. In large organizations, the DBA is assisted by a staff that carries out these functions. Database designers are responsible for identifying the data to be stored in the database and for choosing the appropriate structures to represent and store this data. These tasks are mostly undertaken before the database is actually implemented and populated with data. It is the responsibility of the database designer to communicate with all of the prospective database users in order to understand their requirements and to create a design that meets these requirements. In the traditional processing world, this person would be called a system analyst. If one simply takes the word database out of the description, it would be the definition of a system analyst. Database designers typically interact with each potential group of users and develop views of the database that meet the data and processing requirements of these groups. Each view is then analyzed and integrated with the views of other user groups. The final design must be capable of supporting the requirements of all the user groups. End users are the people whose jobs require access to the database for querying, updating, and generating reports. The database primarily exists for their use. In fact, let's make end user our mystery word for this video. There are several different categories of end users. However, for our purposes, these categories mean little in terms of the professional's responsibilities. Application programmers implement the specifications as programs. Then they test, debug, document, and maintain these canned transactions. Such programmers should be familiar with the full range of capabilities of the database management system in order to accomplish their task. Database implementers design and implement the database modules and interfaces as a software package. A DBMS is a very complex software system that consists of many components or modules, including modules for implementing the catalog, query language processing, interface processing, accessing and buffering, controlling concurrency, and handling data recovery and security. The database management system must interface with other system software such as the operating system and compilers of various programming languages. In a typical programming environment, for example a Visual Basic environment, one might be writing Visual Basic code or Java code or C+ code that accesses a relational database for the data. The system implementer has to be able to handle the linkage between those types of operations. Operators and maintenance personnel, these are system administration personnel, are responsible for the actual running and maintenance of the hardware and software environment for the database system. Previously, I mentioned that redundancy is prevalent in the traditional system environment with applications for the various departments being developed independently. The duplication of effort and waste of storage space caused by storing the same data in multiple files can be very serious. Also, this duplication of data opens the door for inconsistency that seriously inhibits the system's reliability. In the database approach, the views of different user groups are integrated during database design. Ideally, we should have a database design that stores each logical data item, such as a name or a part number, in only one place in the database. Accomplishing this is referred to as data normalization. And we're going to be studying normalization in some detail a little further down the road. It ensures consistency and saves storage space, and interestingly enough, requires a certain amount of redundancy to improve the performance of queries. In fact, it is this redundancy that is the very foundation of the database design called the relational database. Earlier, you may recall that I mentioned that the student number in the student file might also be found in the grade report file. And we also talked about the fact that the section number of the section file might also be found in the grade report file. It is the redundancy that establishes the relationship between those files. Okay, that's a good bit of material. Why don't we take a break and finish this up for episode 7. Oh, shucks, we forgot to talk about a mystery word, didn't we? Why don't we use normalization? Normalization will be our mystery word for this episode. Shouldn't be hard to remember since we're right at the end. So go on down, input the mystery word, and then go out to the coursework area and check our knowledge on the material covered in this episode. And then when you're ready, come on back. We'll have 1 or 2 more episodes to go in this discussion on databases and database users.